Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar about organizational network analysis. My name is Bastian, and I'm the Curriculum Manager at Analytics and AIHR. Together with me today is Michal Gradshtein, who has extensive experience in the field of ONA. Hello, Michal.
Hi, everyone.
I don't want to keep as we have a lot of ground to cover, so there's nothing left for me to say except enjoy this webinar, and Michal, take it away.
Thank you, Bastian, and thank you, everyone, for joining. I'm so happy to see so many people interested in the topic of organizational network analysis. My name is Michal Gradshtein, and I'm an organizational psychologist and the founder and CEO of StarLinks. And for this Valentine's Day, I got to talk on one of my favorite topics because I just love networks. And my love for networks started in academia when I was researching leadership from a relational perspective, as well as newcomers' integration into the informal network. So that was my academic journey. And in my professional journey, my experience spans over the US and Israel, global and local organizations in different industries, as well as in internal and external work experience. And this journey through academia and through organizations led me to found StarLinks, which uses organizational network analysis for personal development and for driving the organizational network bottom up. So this was just a tad about me, and I'm looking forward to hear a tad about you and kind of your familiarity with organizational network analysis. So Bastian is pulling up a poll. You can see it on the right-hand side of your screen. And I would appreciate if you could take a moment and let me know what is your familiarity with ONA. And I would like to, if you could take a moment and answer the poll. I see the numbers are coming. Thank you very much. And we're going to give it a tad longer. Thank you for responding. And we're starting to see that most of the crowd with us today is at the beginning of their ONA journey. And I'm very excited that you've chose to take this webinar as a part of this journey. And I also see that some of you have conducted ONA in the past. So please feel free to use your experience and insights and share them in the chat box. Also, if you have any questions, there is the questions area also on the right next to the polls. Please feel free to write your questions while they pop out in your head. Bastian will follow up, and we'll get to the questions at the end of the webinar and try to answer as many as possible. So today my goal is to really experience with you and kind of explore with you the opportunities that organizational network analysis can open up for us in organizations. We're going to start with some examples of application of ONA, but then we're really going to dive deeper to better understand the network mindset, the language, and some barriers that we should consider. So starting with the end, with the application of ONA. Organizational network analysis is really about using math and graph theory to better understand interconnectivity and flows of resources. It's a diagnostic tool. It's not the cure itself, but it is a very powerful diagnostic tool. So first slide, just the beginning of the webinar, I'm going to throw you into the water. So you're looking at this network map. What do you see, even without exploring further? Well, some of you might have noticed those bottlenecks, and especially this person in the red, because we know that we have the sense that if this person is sick or, God forbid, leave the organization, this is not the ideal situation. Some of you might have noticed those people in the periphery, those untapped potential that we might want to bring into the organization. Others might have noticed there are very few cross-organizational connections, and yet others might have noticed that and looked at the team level and saw that we have some teams that are lacking cohesiveness. So we can use this insights and this data in numerous cases. And let's take team cohesiveness, for example. So we talked about it. So General Motors increased their team's productivity by up to 25% by focusing on team cohesion. They used ONA to first really assess team cohesiveness and find it related to productivity, and then also to find those teams that needed attention in this area and work to develop them. So again, increased productivity by 25% by using ONA and acting on it. It's not the cure, it's the diagnostic. But we can also think not just about the increase in productivity, but also in the resources that we save when we are able to focus our attention to those teams in need and not just do a cross-organizational team development program, but really direct our attention to those teams that need our help the most. Another example would be for innovation. So does anyone know this product? This is Procter & Gamble's White Stripes. This product have brought in revenues of $200 million just in its first year. This product was born out of the collaboration between the food wrapping unit that looked into new adhesives and the oral care unit who looked into a way to allow the whitening gel to rest on the teeth. Now, the oral care unit might have come up with this idea by themselves, but it would have taken longer with more resources, allowing competitors to take over the market. Instead, they took on, with White Strip, they took on 90% of the market share. And that's thanks to collaboration. So what we can do with ONA is really understand how are different parts in our organizations are connected? Is knowledge flowing across the organization? And do we have the adaptive space needed in order to promote emergent innovation? And I really recommend to read this case study. As the last example, we can also use organizational network analysis to help people grow their own networks. Our networks, they offer us opportunities and they offer us constraints, but most of us are not really aware of our networks. So think about your network. Do you know your position in the organizational network? Do you know how much impact you're able to create? Do you know how exposed you are? How connected you are to different parts of the organization? Most of us don't know it, but when we give people with their network analytics and show them what is their impact, what is their exposure, how are they connected, we enable them to take their human capital and really bring it to full realization. And that way we can help people themselves with their development. So these are just some examples. And I haven't talked about mergers and acquisitions. I haven't talked about change processes. I haven't talked about different processes around diversity, because it's really it's not about a list of how we can apply ONA. It's really about understanding the mindset standing behind it so we can understand how we can apply it in our context, in our organization, to our business problems. So a question, if I would have asked you, if I would have asked you to draw a structure that represent how the parts in your organization come together, what would you have drawn? Most people would have drawn something like that, a hierarchical structure. This is also a network. This is the formal hierarchical structure, which is a network of roles that are connected between them through managerial relations. When we want to change this structure, we usually go into top-down change processes of reorganization, right? We go top-down reorganization processes. But in many cases, what we find after we do the reorg is that we get a different structure, a different formal structure that has its own limitations. And again, we need to rethink the structure itself. So as Rob Cross, one of the pioneering ONA practitioners and researchers, say, leave the formal organization be. We have another way. We can focus on the other network in the organization, the informal one. Now, this is a network that is about people and how people are interconnected in the organization. And this network behaves very differently than the formal organization. And if we want to make use of ONA, we need to understand how this network works. So a social network, and this is a key shift in the way we think about how organizations work, a social network is emergent. We cannot control local interactions, but we can put in the context, we can put in the conditions, we can put in the developmental opportunities that will enable these relations to blossom. If you want to use ONA effectively, we need to think about people as social atoms that organize themselves according to some social rules, such as homophily, reciprocity, the Axelrod law, we really need to understand the underlying social questions underneath the business questions if we want to make use of ONA and use it effectively. A second thing that is very different from the formal structure and we need to understand in social networks and informal networks is that there isn't just one network. There isn't just one type of relation. There are various relations that can occur between any two people. People may have strictly work relations. Some may have social relations. Some may exchange knowledge. Some may exchange innovative ideas. And if we want to use ONA, we really need to focus on these ties and understand what ties are relevant to our business case, to our research question. And when we think about these ties, we also should think about how to measure them. Now, there is a big debate in the ONA arena about passive ONA versus active ONA. And I'm a big advocate for active ONA, but the question which one to use is also dependent on the question at hand. So, for example, if you want to look at relationships outside of the organization with customers, vendors, other professionals in other organizations, you might want to use passive ONA. It might be easier and better way to collect the data. However, if you want to understand the nature of the relations within your organization, I would advocate for an active ONA. I also think active ONA, by using questions, can create those moments of recognition in the organization when people need to stop and think about who helped them, who gave them knowledge, who gave them advice. So I see it also as a cultural intervention to use active ONA. But it's not one thing. It's not either active or passive. And maybe in some cases, it's the combination of them, of the two. When you choose how to measure, you need to think about which relations matter to you, but also about ethics, regulation, the organizational culture, the employee experience. So you need to take all of these together and understand really what is it that you are measuring? What is it that you're later analyzing? Because a formula, you can put different data into it and it will give you results, but you need to really make sure you understand the relations you put in and the data you put into the network analysis. A last point is, in order for us to use ONA and to make the most out of it, we need to really open up our frame of thought and think at different levels. We can use network analysis for understanding individuals, for understanding groups, for understanding the whole organization. And when we add in layers of attribute data, we're able to get into more insights. If we think in this multi-level, we can work in ways to align the different levels and operate on the organizational network from different perspectives. So I hope by now you have the network glasses on, and now we're going to move on and dive in a little deeper into the language of ONA and how do we read it. So networks have two main building blocks. The first building block is the node. A node is either an individual, a team, the entire organization, and when we run a network analysis, we run it on a set of nodes that define our network. Now, these nodes can be further differentiated using attribute data, such as role, managerial level, tenure, even engagement and performance indicators. So we have our set of nodes, and now the second building block is the tie. And we have either undirected ties, and undirected ties are those that are really a fact in a way that you don't need to ask both sides. No one side can dispute the relation. If you're married, you're married. If you share the same office, you share the same office. So this is the undirected ties. But for most cases, in organizational network analysis, we will be more interested in looking at directed ties. Directed ties can give us a lot of information if we know how to use them. So let's take an example. If Anna goes to Jake for knowledge, we can learn about Jake's role as an expert, right? If you take the entire network and see who are the experts that most arrows are pointing at. However, if you take the same question and with a mathematical operation, we'll reverse the direction of the tie. Now we can talk about the flows of knowledge. So now we can learn about Anna's exposure, for example, to different flows of knowledge in the organization. We can assess how fast these flows are and if there's anything stopping them in the way. Another way to gain insights from directed ties is to look at them together. So let's take this example. We have Anna and Dana, and we know that Anna is the boss of Dana. What does it tell you? Not much yet. But what if I tell you that Dana goes to Anna for support? And I'll also tell you that both of them share information and knowledge with one another. Now we get a little bit of a better sense of the nature of the relationship between Anna and Dana. We can look at multiplexity, meaning number of relations between the same two people, and reciprocity as indicators of the tie strength, which can also tell us a lot. It can tell us a lot at different levels. So let's see how we can use the network in different levels. So for the personal, if we take all of these ties that we talked about, we can look at individuals' social capital and influence. Individual social capital is related to career progression, performance, well-being, and other variables. So we can use ONA to really understand individuals. Then we can go on a higher level and think about the groups. And in organizations, we have various groups. We have functional units, we have geographical locations, we have, for example, age groups. Even people that went through certain types of training, we can think of them as a differentiator of groups. So really when we understand the way that we can use attribute data that is already, for the most case, existing in our HCM systems, we can really take the network analysis and derive many, many insights from it by choosing different grouping. And last, we can take it to the upper level and look at the network as a whole and think about the network of how centralized is our organization, how fast is it, how agile it is, how well connected it is. And we can look at the organization and the structure as a whole. So after pumping you up with organizational network analysis and showing you all the things that we can think about to produce value out of organizational network analysis, I also want to put some limitations or really things to watch out for, look for, think about when we do ONA. So the first thing is that it's not just about the structure. It's not just about your centrality or the average path length or structural indicators. It's really also about the content. And the content is a must, is a thing that we must understand in order to understand which analyses are even relevant, which of them even make sense, and what do the network mean. The second thing that we should pay attention to is the context. So organizational network analysis doesn't tell us what to do. It doesn't give us the entire scope of things, but it does give us a direction. And with that direction, we should look for more context. I'll give you an example. If you go to an x-ray and the doctor tells you your arm is broken, the doctor can't tell you why your arm got broken. Maybe you're hanging out with the wrong crowd. Maybe you just came back from your ski vacation. The doctor doesn't know that, but he can tell you that your arm is broken. The same with ONA. We can use different cuts of attribute data and different things to add layers into our insights and our understanding, but we should also really focus on understanding the context in which we get this picture and not just focus on the picture itself to drive action. The last thing I want to kind of put there is about the visualization. So one of the coolest things about organizational network analysis is the network. People love the network image. I know it. I get great reactions for it. But a part of the thing about the network visualization that is very intuitive, it's also driving our insights, our initial insights. What we see is kind of where our mind is going. But so look at this network. For example, you can see people at the core, the pink ones at the core. You can see periphery. You can get some insights from this visualization. Now you take the exact same data, put it in a different visualization that is more about the groups. And now you can see things that you might have not seen in the previous visualization, such as the connectivity within and between teams. So when we want to drive our insights, it's really important to use the analysis, to use the math part, not just the visualization part, and then support your insights and support your conclusions with the visualization. So I took you through the journey of some examples and diving in a little deeper and putting some limitations to it. And I want to throw you in a little bit more and do a little bit of an experiment with you. So this is a network map of a department that has an headquarters and 4 local teams. And in the green on the side, we see senior management. And the arrows, the ties that we're looking at are flows of knowledge and information. I'm going to give you another visualization of the same data, but without the headquarters. I'm going to give you a moment. And if you want to use the chat, you're also welcome to use the chat. And Bastian, if something comes up, please let me know. So what do you see? Or what would you do? So I hope some of you screamed right now at me at the screen and say, wait, we don't know what to do. We don't have enough context. And that's right. You need to better understand. It's not just the map. You need to really understand a little bit about the context in this in order to understand what to do. But from providing this map and explaining you the ties and what it is about and putting layers of attribute data, you can already see that senior management is really detached from what's happening in those local teams if the headquarters is not connecting them. And we can see that there is very little cross-learning between those teams, very few connections between them, with one person in particularly as the hub of knowledge and information flowing into them. Another example is the different organizations, flows of ideas on how to improve work. So who do you talk to when you have ideas on how to improve work? Where do the ideas come to? So I'm going to give you, again, a moment to look at it. The size of the node is the in degree, the number of ties coming in to that node. And not sure what your eye caught, but I assume some of you caught here those people that are really peripheral or isolates in this idea exchange network. But if I dive deeper, really and see that we have 2 sources, two main hubs of ideas that do not connect between them. And not just directly, there are hardly any indirect ties that enable the flow of ideas from one center of ideas to another center of ideas to integrate and push those ideas forward. So these were just 2 short experiments to end the time that I talk. And now I would like to see if you have any questions. And Bastien, if you can bring up some of the questions that people had, we will try to answer as many as possible.
Sure. So the question that I got asked was, as far as network visualization software, what do you use and recommend, or what do you know that is what is free and open source that you might recommend? Any favorite or default network layouts?
Okay, good question. And this is very, there are numerous. I use UCINet, UCNet. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. So I use UCNet, and now with StarLinks, we do the analysis on the system itself. There's also Gephi, there's Node Excel, there's an R visualization for network. So it's really about your kind of trying out these different technologies and see which one is more, I would say that more intuitive to you to use. I'm not sure to tell you in details how different they are with the different analysis that they offer. Again, I use UCNet, and but I know of many that use Gephi and R. I hope that helped.
Yeah, I hope so as well. There was another question about, do you believe that ONA and people analytics are a newer and more analytical variation of knowledge management? Good
question. If I guess it depends on also how you define knowledge management, but definitely, network analysis helps in that domain, and it's a great way to think about knowledge management and knowledge flows. And even with that, there's again this debate between using enterprise social networks and analyzing them, or are you focused on more understanding how people, asking people where do they get their knowledge and how do they exchange knowledge and what do they know, and maybe that way to look. So I definitely, yes, there is, it is definitely a method that we can use for knowledge management. But again, we need to dive deeper into the details in order to understand what in knowledge management do we focus on and we want to establish, to research and ask and understand. I hope that helped too. If any answer that I provide, it's a one-way channel. I wish we could have a debate, but if there are any questions that I'm not answering fully, of course you have here my email, and you're most welcome to ask me further.
Perfect. Just a couple of more questions. I have time for 2 more questions. The first one is, people would like to know how to capture this information. For instance, the information flow of knowledge. How do you capture this type of information? Because a lot of this flow of information can also happen offline. So how do you capture this into data?
Oh, great. So this relates again to, this is, by the way, one of the criticisms on passive ONA is that you have only the subset of the organization that is actually using the system that you're using to extract the data. With active ONA, you ask, for example, who do you turn to for knowledge and information needed for your work? And then you can ask further what, to have people indicate which type of knowledge they're getting from the person they went to. There is no one answer, but these are the 2 main places to capture data. You either collect it from an enterprise social network, emails, calendars, or you ask people to tell you what they do and how they interconnect with one another.
And finally, just a last question. What would be a good starting point for building an ONA? And how do you identify the attributes that one needs to have the nodes to get linked to it? Any resource to provide some step-by-step approach or something similar, that would be great.
So that's a great question. Of course, the first place to start is in an organizational context is with the business questions. So you want to understand what is it that you're interested in understanding. But really, to use ONA, before running to use ONA, I think this is the tricky thing about ONA. So on one hand, I'm showing you this network map, and it's really intuitive and really easy to read, and it feels easy. It feels simple. But there are so many details that you need to pay attention to on the way to that map that makes this map meaningful or not. And there is a lot of learning to be done. So I would definitely recommend books, reading, learning more about organizational network analysis, understanding these details. UCNet and Henneman wrote, there's an online book available that follows through UCNet and also teaches. There's a Brugatti book, there's Rob Cross's book, there's Nicholas, I can't pronounce his last name, but there are different sources to read about and learn about the details, but you need to start with knowing how to approach it and also understanding the business questions so you can match the 2 and provide the most effective ONA you can for the business or the individuals.
All right, thank you, Michael. That was great. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. So if you have any questions remaining, please feel free to email Michal and she'll answer them as soon as she can. Furthermore, I've got a couple of questions for people who would like to have this presentation. You will receive this presentation at the end of this webinar. Lastly, that concludes this webinar. I hope you've all enjoyed it and learned more about how you can use ONA within your own organization. Michal, do you have any last words?
Thank you, Bastian. Thank you, everyone, for attending, spending this time with us, learning about ONA. You have my email here. You can reach me on LinkedIn. I'll be happy to answer any questions that left unanswered. And thank you again. it was fun for me. Hope for you too.
All right, yeah, also, if just speaking for myself, I really enjoyed it. So thank you, Michal, and thank you all for attending, and goodbye.